I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new plug-in hybrid Lexus NX450h Plus. If you're a subscriber to Chasing Cars, you will have seen my review of the new NX250, 350 Turbo and 350 Hybrid 2 days ago. Well, it's now Friday and we're officially allowed to talk about the new NX450h Plus, the first ever plug-in hybrid that Lexus has released anywhere, globally or here in Australia. Now, by this point, if you're interested in premium midsize SUVs, you will have known about this new second generation NX, and I refer you to our very detailed video of the other NX variants so you can get the full rundown, because in today's episode of Chasing Cars, I'm mainly going to concentrate on the NX450h Plus and what you get for this car's $90,000 asking price. Now, that's not cheap for a Lexus NX, but this is a one variant powertrain. You get every single feature included as standard for that price. So it's basically the full fat NX, and it's about $6,000 more than the variant below it, which is an NX350 Hybrid F Sport with the Enhancement Pack 2. Now, speaking of F Sport, you can only get the NX450h Plus as an F Sport, and Lexus Australia says that's because this is the quickest Lexus NX. It's also the most frugal Lexus NX if you tap into its plug-in hybrid powertrain, and that's a critical point. If you're not going to be able to commit to plugging in this vehicle on a regular basis, then you're probably going to be better off with an NX350h, but I'll explain more about that in the running cost segment. In today's video, we're going to do our usual thing. We'll check out the interior, the back seat, and the boot of the plug-in NX. We'll discuss the running costs, and then we'll head out on the road to see what this most powerful version of the NX, with 227 kilowatts of power combined, is actually like to drive. But if at any point you feel like you've seen enough, you're interested in buying an NX450h Plus, use the link that I've dropped below the video to take the next step with Chasing Cars by downloading a brochure, seeing every color available on this car, and organizing a test drive. And don't forget to subscribe. Already up on the channel is my detailed review of the Lexus NX range, where I go into extremely excruciating detail about the interior, the different colors, the different variants. But on this one, I'm just going to be talking about the NX450h Plus F Sport, because everything you see here is included as standard and there are no options. First of all, I'm going to cover the elephant in the room. Even though this is the most expensive NX, it gets a standard porthole sunroof rather than a panoramic sunroof, and unfortunately it does not get Mark Levinson premium audio. And the reason for both of those things is weight reduction. A huge piece of glass in the roof is heavy, and a plug-in hybrid is already a porker, including this one. And similarly, the Mark Levinson speakers, and particularly the subwoofer, took up too much weight, so Lexus Australia decided to opt for the standard stereo in this car. The consolation is that the standard stereo in the NX is good. It's just that the Mark Levinson is very good. I think if you're an audiophile, you'll notice the difference, but if you just like your music in a more casual sense, the standard stereo is actually fine, and I enjoyed a couple of hours driving the car, listening to my tunes and having a really fun time without Mark Levinson. So you can let me know what you think down below in the comments, but look, I get it, my car has a premium stereo, I understand. In terms of the rest of the infotainment in the NX, that's where this car changes completely when compared to the first gen car. No more trackpads. Instead, we have this big 14-inch touchscreen here, which is well within the reach of the driver. And in fact, Lexus have put a lot of effort into UX and cabin design with this new cockpit here that they call Tazuna. Everything's meant to fall to hand, and honestly, it does. The screen, helpfully, is also very snappy. It has way more processing power behind it compared to the old car. No lag at all when zooming in. You can tap off to media, car functions, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto really quickly, but they are currently wired. This car was meant to have wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. It wasn't validated in time for Australia. There was some issues there, but Lexus Australia says that they are working on it and they're hoping to issue it as an update, including to cars that have already been delivered like this one at a later date. Looking forward, we've got a fully digital dash. We can see our electric range, we can see our petrol capacity, we can see our combined range up here, and we get kind of a cool graph of like your power and charge state. You can see your music choice, navigation, but no full map in front of you. However, we do have a very cool color heads-up display, which is huge, and when you run your fingers over the shortcuts on the steering wheel, you actually see the controls replicated in the head-up display. So it's really easy to understand what you're about to do. It's a little bit more difficult to see through polarized sunglasses, but if you crank up the brightness, you can actually see it, which is nice. Colors in here are black, which is conservative but easy to clean, black and red two-tone, which is probably the way I'd go, and also white and black two-tone, which is extra, as in extra indulgent rather than extra cost, but it definitely looks cool. The F-Sport seats are the best seats in any NX. They're really supportive and comfortable. They've got full electric adjustment and also memory. There's an E-latch system for the doors where you just push a button to open the door. That's so it can operate in concert with a sensor that's looking for cars and cyclists coming down your side, so you're not going to accidentally knock somebody off their bike. There's a momentary delay when you press that button if a vehicle is detected, but you can override it with a manual latch as well in there. Quality is good, so we've got lots of soft materials as you'd expect for a Lexus. Somebody asked if the center console creaks. Well, I'm leaning in with my mic and I can't seem to make it creak. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say build quality is good, but let's revisit once these cars have a few more Ks on them. And in terms of storage, we've got a deep bin here, wireless smartphone charging on a kind of sliding pad, two big cup holders, one of these trick dual opening center consoles, and decently sized door bins as well. Plus the seating position's comfortable and low, big mirrors, easy to see out of this car. So it kind of feels nicely set up, I would say, for driving. That's the front seat. Let's check out the second row. The previous Lexus NX was pretty pokey in the second row for adults, and as you can see, despite the car being pretty much the same size as it was before, a slightly longer wheelbase and smarter interior packaging has liberated more legroom. So I'm 6 foot, I've got my driver's seat set up in my normal driving position, and I've still got several inches of legroom. Toe room's good even with that seat set at its lowest setting, and headroom, I've got lots, actually more than if this car had a panoramic sunroof. Check out my review of the NX350h, which has the bigger sunroof, and you'll see how much more headroom that eats away. So I guess there's silver linings to every black headlined cloud. In terms of fitting 3 people across here, you can do it. There's a bit of a hump in the floor. It's not the worst I've seen, but I think this car would be comfortable for 4 and just bearable for 5. We do have air vents in the center. That's good to see. They're on every NX. We've got a 12-volt socket, 2 more USB-C ports here in the back of the car, a flip-down armrest with 2 cup holders, matte pockets in both of the back seats, and soft touch materials. I know that's your favorite remark I make, but this car has soft touch materials in the back doors too. And I did get one specific question from a viewer about the second row of the plug-in hybrid, about whether the backrest reclines, and I'm happy to report that it does recline. Not a huge amount, but definitely enough to make it feel kind of relaxing for a long drive. Kids will like that. And the conventional windows mean you get a good view out, which is going to help guard against car sickness. So that's the back seat. Next up, we're going to check out the boot space. Here around the back of the new NX450h Plus, we have the same dramatic lit light bar here that extends between the 2 tail lights. New taillight design, it all looks pretty funky, and everyone's going to know that you bought the best NX because it says NX450h Plus all-wheel drive around the back. Now, every NX gets a standard power tailgate. It beeps once. Unlike a RAV4, it doesn't keep beeping. Now that door opens up and it reveals a 520 litre boot, and it also reveals this quite dainty little carrying case for your charging cables. Now, you actually get 2 charging cables included with this car. Lexus will also cover the installation of a standard wall box for your garage or your driveway at home. So even though it's $6,000 more than the next variant in the range, you're starting to reap quite a few of those benefits quite quickly. Additionally, you get Lexus Encore Platinum, which is like a super primo ownership club with this car that lets you drive other Lexus models up to 4 times in 3 years for up to 8 days at a time, including cars like the LC convertible. So that's a pretty cool inclusion. You also get a net off to the left-hand side, a couple of hooks in the boot here, but what you won't find under the boot floor is a spare wheel. Instead, every variant of the NX, including the plug-in hybrid, is actually fitted with run-flat tires, and you'll notice a little RFT badge on the Bridgestone Alenza tires fitted to this particular car. So underneath the boot floor, you'll just find a spot to stash the cargo cover here. Now we do have buttons to close the tailgate or close it and lock the vehicle, but our last chore before we drive the NX450h Plus is to talk about range, charging, and running costs. But what's it going to cost you to run a Lexus NX 450h Plus? Because this is going to be where some people are going to be able to extract the highest benefit from the plug-in version of this car. Now, the NX 350 hybrid is already very fuel efficient. We managed 5.5 litres per 100 Ks in our testing, but if you plug in the NX 450h Plus on a daily basis or every few days, you're going to be able to go better than that. And that's because the WLTP EV only range of this car is rated at 69 to 75 kilometers. It's going to be closer to the 69k mark WLTP, because the Australian spec of the NX 450h Plus is fully featured with the biggest possible wheels, the biggest list of equipment, and so it's a bit heavier than base plug-in hybrids overseas. Now, you charge the NX via this Type 2 charge port here behind a right-hand fuel filler flap sort of thing. You've got a general fuel filler on the left-hand side of the car, which takes 95 octane petrol. So the combined range of this car is very long indeed, because you have both 69 kilometers of electric range WLTP before the 2.5 litre petrol engine takes over. Now, you are going to use slightly more fuel in the plug-in hybrid NX if you're running it on dead batteries, and that's because this car is the heaviest NX of the lot, and running it with a dead battery is basically like pulling dead weight. So if you are going to be able to plug this car in regularly, you're going to be able to extract the benefits of its combined powertrain. Now, what are you going to pay to fill it up? Well, you're going to pay a couple of dollars if you're filling this thing up at home at 25 cents per kilowatt hour. It's not an expensive car to fuel with electricity. So that's going to cost you about a third of what it would cost to run it on petrol. If you have household solar, it's going to be a lot cheaper again. But again, hauling dead batteries around, it is going to use more energy than just the regular NX 350 hybrid. So think closely about it before choosing one or the other. Now, the warranty on the vehicle is 5 years on unlimited kilometers, but the high voltage components are warranted to 8 years and 160,000 Ks. In terms of servicing, like every NX, the plug-in hybrid costs $495 a year for the first 3 years. So a 3-year, 45,000 kilometer cost of $1,485. And in the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer spent $1,095 to comprehensively insure a new Lexus NX. Everybody's situation varies, and your premium will vary based on things insurers take into account, like where you live, who drives the car, and their driving history. So we're finally out here having a drive of the new plug-in hybrid Lexus NX, which is cool because, as well as the NX 350 Turbo, this is the only completely new powertrain for the second gen NX. The NX 350 hybrid is a new iteration of a petrol-electric hybrid powertrain that we've seen many times before, and the NX 250 is the dynamic force 4-cylinder engine that's also used in the Lexus ES and the RAV4 and the Camry and a bunch of other Toyota and Lexus products. But the plug-in hybrid is really cool. And the way it works is it has a 2.5 litre naturally aspirated petrol 4-cylinder engine, and it has 3 electric motors. So this car has electric all-wheel drive, a bit like the self-charging, for want of a better phrase, NX 350h, except it has a lot more beef. And because this car has a big battery, it is able to be driven on electric power alone for 69 kilometers WLTP. Now, I am on the launch drive of this NX 450h Plus. I think we need to get it on our own testing roads in Sydney to give a definitive answer on range. But from what I've been seeing so far, I've actually been getting slightly better energy consumption than WLTP, though that is going off the trip computer, which is usually pretty good, but it's not always 100% accurate in any car. But basically the NX uses about 26 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers of electricity in WLTP terms, which is kind of high for an EV, but pretty much par for the course, or actually a little bit better than normal for a plug-in hybrid. That's because they tend to be heavy and they don't extract particularly high efficiency because of the additional weight of the petrol engine. But I've been seeing 24, which isn't bad at all. Now, that's the first thing to think about when buying a plug-in hybrid. It's the question of how are you going to drive this vehicle? If you're just going to drive it around and never charge it, either because you don't have a charging situation at home, you don't have a power point that you can plug it into, you don't have any interest in engaging with that, then Lexus can sell you a better product for your needs, and that's the NX 350h series parallel hybrid, which does it all for you. You never have to charge that car. It can't be driven on electric power alone, not very far at least, but it works with the petrol engine to determine the most frugal way of doing business. And it ends up delivering about 5.5 litres per 100 Ks. However, if you do have the ability to charge a vehicle at home or at your workplace, and you're interested in it and you want to dip a toe in the water of fully electric driving, then the NX450h Plus can use 0 litres per 100 kilometres, at least for that first 69 Ks or so. And in its place, it uses around 24 to 26 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres of electricity. And if you're charging from solar or low-cost electricity at home, then this can become really quite inexpensive as a car to run every single day, but you still have the flexibility and the safety net of a petrol engine to back you up, which is definitely a attractive recipe for a lot of people here in Australia. But let's talk about what's actually going on under the bonnet, because it is complicated and it is a bit to wrap your head around like any plug-in hybrid. So we've got a 2.5 litre naturally aspirated petrol 4-cylinder engine. We've got our 3 electric motors that I've already mentioned, but essentially our petrol engine is making about 136 kilowatts of power. Our front electric motors make about 134 kilowatts of electric power, and then there's a rear electric motor making 40 kilowatts of electric power. So as you can see, it's not particularly rear biased. In fact, it's heavily front biased, but it is capable of sending quite a strong amount of torque to the rear wheels to deliver electric all-wheel drive. And I ran a long-term Toyota RAV4 hybrid, not a plug-in hybrid, just a standard hybrid, and that was fine in the snow. I found that the involvement of the rear axle was enough to keep you moving and still deliver a pretty good result. But it's not a mechanical all-wheel drive system. If you want that, you're going to have to buy the NX350 Turbo, which has a conventional Haldex type all-wheel drive that can send 50% of engine torque to the rear wheels when needed. Now, the plug-in hybrid can be driven in a number of ways. The way I would recommend driving it, most of the time at least, would be charging it up and then using all of the electric juice and then letting the petrol engine kick on if that's what needs to happen. However, if you're going on a longer trip, you're driving in the countryside like I am now, you can choose to either run the system in a fully automated mode, which cycles between full EV and a hybrid-like powertrain according to what the computer thinks is the most advantageous way to extract economy, or you can toggle it yourself. You can force it to run the petrol engine at all times and actually top up the battery. That could be useful if you know that you're driving towards a city and then you want to run around in electric power only during start-stop driving. But of course, using the engine as a generator is not particularly fuel efficient. But I think letting it cycle in automatic mode is probably the way to go for these trips further afield. That being said, thinking about the way the majority of people drive in Australia, most people have a suburban commute or an interurban commute, and then occasionally you'll go out on the weekend and you'll need to use the longer range capability. And for those kind of purposes, thinking about my own commute, for instance, I would charge up the vehicle at my office, in my case, and then drive home, drive back to the office the next day, and top it up again. So all of that commuting would be on electric only power, and you'd have a decent amount of power to play with. The motors can generate over 130 kilowatts of power on their own, so it's no slug running in EV mode. In fact, if I can force it into EV mode now, we say EV mode, so engine's now completely off. It won't come on unless I absolutely floor the throttle, which is telling the system that I need to get out of the way very quickly and I want to generate the full 227 kilowatts of combined power. But if I don't do that, if I don't stand on the throttle, it's just going to glide in electric power, and it's nice and agile. It's nice and responsive underfoot. You can really get it moving on electric power alone, certainly more so than the standard hybrid version of this car. So it's kind of a best of both worlds situation. You might not be ready yet for a full EV. The only full EV Lexus can sell you, if you really want a Lexus, is a UX300e, which has a relatively short range. It's quite a small vehicle and it only has CHAdeMO charging, which is pretty old school. So the NX450h Plus will be a really nice bridging solution, a transition solution for most people. And of course it competes with cars like the Mercedes GLC 300e. That's already on the market as a plug-in hybrid in this segment. So I'm doing 60 now, coming towards an 80 zone. I won't need the petrol engine to kick in. I'll just leap forward, immediate torque. I'm locked in EV mode. So while it's not going to give you that kind of slam into the back of the seat as a Tesla Model X or something, it definitely feels very sprightly in electric mode. Then I can say hold mode, hold down the button for that. Now, it's now charging the electric motor, petrol engine kicks on. Now I'm going to let you hear the petrol engine at full chart. So it's pretty loud, but I think you can get used to it. And you won't hear it very often because most of the time this car is going to bleed in electric torque and it won't need to rev its head off, but it is louder than the series parallel hybrid version of this car, that's for sure. Now, when it comes to ride and handling, the NX plug-in hybrid is a mixed bag, if I'm honest. The steering is quick and precise and the ratio feels intuitive, I really like it. But the body control is not as good as the standard NX hybrid or the NX turbo or the base engine. And that's because the plug-in hybrid is pretty heavy. Essentially what we're dealing with here is the NX hybrid plus more weight, because the basic setup, the petrol engine and 3 motors, the hybrid has that. But then you add in an 18.1 kilowatt hour battery here on the plug-in hybrid, and all of a sudden we're tipping the scales at about 2 tons, which is fairly heavy for a midsize SUV. The Audi Q5 also weighs that much, but it doesn't have a battery situating so much of the weight in one place. And I think that car more fluently is able to move around, whereas the NX plug-in hybrid feels absolutely fine up to about 7.5 tenths, and then you start feeling that weight coming into play, and it's just not as fun to kind of work with the chassis in the plug-in hybrid as in the standard hybrid. That said, this is a luxury midsize crossover, and not many owners are going to flog this car, for want of a better word. It's just for keen drivers, the standard hybrid is a lighter car and its chassis just feels a little bit more sweet and a little bit more cohesive. Speaking as a pragmatist and a realist though, that sort of thing isn't going to matter to most people, and this car is perfectly mild-mannered to drive for the kinds of purposes most of us have. The ride quality isn't quite as compliant though, because that is more weight to manage, so the suspension does feel a few digits stiffer, if I might use that kind of expression, because it needs to keep all that weight in check. So it isn't quite as supple as the base car on 18s especially, or a standard hybrid F Sport, which doesn't have to rein in as much weight, although it is still a reasonably heavy car. Refinement's pretty good. The main thing I'm hearing right now in electric mode is wind noise, because of course the powertrain's not making any real noise. The view out's good, the seat's comfortable. All the technology works really well. That new package is good. No Mark Levinson is a shame, but the standard stereo is okay. In fact, it's good, just not great. So yeah, at $89,900, it's not a cheap car, but it is a well-integrated, cohesive feeling car that's going to work for a lot of people as one solution before we wait for more EVs to come onto the market, for Toyota and Lexus to offer more and larger EVs. The NX plug-in works pretty well for now. So those are my first impressions of the new Lexus NX450h Plus plug-in hybrid. In some ways you can think of this as a rather expensive Lexus NX, but in other ways you can think of it as actually a reasonably priced full-fat luxury midsize SUV that gives you 69 kilometers of all-electric range, which for a lot of Australians will really suit their everyday driving before tapping into the petrol engine for those family road trips or longer trips further afield. Personally, I can see the recipe working. I don't live in a house that has a charger, so for me, I would go for an NX350h. But if you have a garage, if you have an off-street park where Lexus can install that standard wall box free of charge, then this thing really could be good buying based on your circumstances. I'm keen to know your view though, so let me know down below this video in the comments. While you're there, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Don't forget the next steps with Chasing Cars options. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.